Good morning and welcome. Thank you for registering for today's masterclass, which I've been looking forward to for quite a while now. It all started when talking to Sarah and Michael about ethics, revenue management, dynamic pricing, and it quickly proved to be an area of very diverse opinions. Delighted that so many of you have joined us today, especially now that most hotels are open again and perhaps operating with a reduced team. So we're all the more grateful that you've chosen to spend your time tuning into this HOSPA masterclass. It's 10 a.m. It's Wednesday, May 27th, 2021. My name is Jane Pendlebury. I'm the CEO of HOSPA, the Hospitality Professionals Association. And I'm excited to introduce you to my very informed panel. Michael Hayward, who sits on the HOSPA board and is a well-known expert on revenue management, and also Sarah Duncan, who is HOSPA's advisor on sustainability, another crucially important topic and one that we will be covering in depth at our annual conference in November. And Sarah has also written the Ethical Business Book, which is well worth a read, so she couldn't be better placed to promote the value of good ethics in hospitality. We are expecting a very interactive hour coming up, so please do pop any questions or comments into the questions tab on the GoTo platform. And if there's more questions than we get time to address today, we will get back to you afterwards, and maybe we even put a question and answer session alongside the recording, which will be posted onto our website alongside all the other recordings of our masterclasses with a summary of the key points of today's event as well. Thank you for joining us and for being brave enough to address this topic, Michael and Sarah. Michael, you'll be playing the role of ruthless commercial leader today. Would you like to introduce yourself and your company?
Absolutely. So my name's Michael Hayward from the Hayward Group. My background is in hotel operations and revenue management, as well as franchise support. I've worked with Accor and IHG over many years, and I've been running my own business, a rapidly growing business, I'm pleased to say. Over the past 6 years, we do leadership, commercial and operations consulting, as well as quite a bit of work on the education side in corporate education, running leadership programs, developing graduate programs, and also lecturing with Glion, so world standard higher education in hospitality. And that keeps us fairly busy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. And Sarah, who, as you will expect, will be representing the ethical approach and the consumer, the guests who maybe don't understand revenue management as much as we do, those of us that are involved in the system. Sarah, over to you.
Yes, so my background is hospitality. I started life in posh hotels and then worked in Asia in club development and spa development. I then came back to the UK and set up my own consultancy about 15 years ago now. So working with business development, I've migrated over the last few years into much more of the realm of sustainability, as Jane, as you mentioned, and ethical business practice. And now that's what I consult. I still help businesses with business development, but I do it with a sustainable and ethical hat on. And as you mentioned, I have a very practical guide book that I have that I've written, which sort of supports that. So yes, today I am representing the customer in this debate and challenging whether these revenue management practices really have the if they're designed to have the customer really in mind.
Brilliant, thank you. So when I was first introduced to revenue management 20 odd years ago, it was all about the rights, selling the right room, right price, right time, right customer, and all of those rights, right length of stay, but at what cost? And I think that's the point of today's. Michael, do you want to start by just giving us an overview of the business expectations of the revenue manager, what the business expects from the revenue manager?
Yeah, I think one of the starting points, I mean, you're saying from your introduction to revenue management 20 years ago, revenue management is still a relatively new discipline. if you compare it to the other people sitting around the board table from finance, marketing, HR, operations, I mean, these guys and their disciplines have existed for a long time. And many of the guys who I started out with in revenue management have now got broader commercial roles. So it's been fascinating to see how it's grown. But one of the things that makes the revenue manager's role, particularly in hotels, quite unique and has a big impact on how we work and how we make decisions, is that you are measured daily on your performance. The RGI report comes out from STR, and every single day, are you winning or losing against your competition? And if I can be a little colloquial, like my maintenance manager in Brisbane said to me one day, opinions are like arseholes, everybody's got one. So as soon as things aren't going well, everyone's got an opinion on what you should be doing. When things are going brilliantly, you have lots of people crowding around taking credit. If things aren't going well, there tends to be a lonely character stood there trying to explain why the RGI is declining or not as good as it should be or whatever. So the reason I use that colourful explanation, the pressures and measures on a revenue manager's performance are quite unique in being pretty close to real time as far as your performance against your competition, and your competition's changing all the time. So it leads you into being very heavily driven to what do I have to do to generate more top-line revenue performance? It draws you into, let's just get more and more OTA business in, even though there's a massive commission compared to everything else. Not being in love with the net leisure wholesale business, which looks cheap when it comes through and impacts your average rate, regardless of the fact that the customer is paying a different price to that because they're paying the retail price and you're getting the wholesale price. So there's all of these pressures going on. And even though I'm going to be playing the role of the cold-hearted commercial animal today, I think it is important to recognize that revenue managers are making decisions all the time, and it is very clear there are things that are not only unethical, but also illegal. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of research to find when the consumer protection authorities all across the world jump in when there's price fixing or when there's bait and switch or any of those, frankly, illegal behaviours. But I think for many of us in revenue management, there's that real awareness of what's illegal as well as unethical, and real awareness of the pressures that we're under to get the top line performance. And when we do well, we really can deliver multiples of our cost in the improvement of the value of the business and the revenue performance. So all of those pressures come together. And for many of us in the back of our mind, we're a little curious about how others see the ethical lines of what we do to drive top line business performance. And that's why I thought it'd be fascinating to play devil's advocate, if you like, in this discussion on ethics.
Sarah, thank you, Michael, would you like to set the scene from the guest's perspective? And I'm sure you'll touch on the importance of trust and transparency.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't want to be a revenue manager for all of the reasons that Michael's just set out, because there is a lot of pressure on it. But bluntly speaking, that's not my problem as a customer. It is, as you say, a relatively new role. And actually, if you ask people outside of the hospitality industry about revenue managers, they sort of think, what is that role? And there's something immediately when you start thinking about managing revenue that, and because it's new and because it's in the backdrop of big data and potentially kind of AI and obviously e-commerce, there's something that immediately feels quite devious and manipulative about it, just by the name of the area, managing revenue. But to be fair, I don't think if you ask most people on the street, what's the role of a revenue manager in a hotel, they really know. So aside from the pressures of that, I think the problem with this from the customer point of view is exactly, Jane, what you just said. It's a trust and transparency point of view. Let's look at pricing as a first point of call. The sort of fluid pricing, the managing the pricing as you were just referring to, Michael. The fact is that customers, we're not naive, we're not stupid. We completely understand the idea of supply and demand, and we completely understand the idea of tactical pricing. We see it in our everyday lives, in our everyday purchasing. And that can be as simple as everything's on sale in January, or Easter eggs cut price beginning of May, or 2 for 1 from promotions, or many different areas where we know that I can buy something today at this price and it'll be a different price tomorrow for whatever promotional reason. The difference there is that it's very overt. We understand it because it's sort of transparent. Even if there's a difference in price, for example, I know that if I go to the O2 and I want to buy a ticket to see Dua Lipa, who I don't really know, it's going to cost me more than if I was going to see somebody, Jethro Tull, for example. That really shows my age. But what I'm saying there is that I know that that the demand for one thing is higher than the other. So I get all of that. Unfortunately, the rod that I think hotels have made for their own back with revenue management is that this personalized pricing, I don't as a customer understand. And if I don't understand it, then I don't trust it. That's the sort of bottom line of it. And I'm just going to sort of push my point one step further here, if I may. When I was just looking at this a little bit, I stumbled across the Trivago ad, recent Trivago ad, which, if I may just for a moment, I'm just going to briefly, for the audience here, just talk you through it, because this would be my sort of exhibit A if we were in a court of law now. Posh woman walks into large hotel, hands over her loyalty card to reception. With your gold card, madam, that'll be £120, says the receptionist brightly. 4-star hotel with a pool for this price, not that bad, says the posh lady quite smugly. To her left, a younger lady receptionist says, that's £95 per night, please, she says to the very smiley Trivago lady, much to the annoyance of the posh, originally smug lady. Trivago compares prices from hundreds of websites worldwide, making it simple to find a great deal at any hotel. Give it a try, says the now even smilier and even smugger Trivago lady. That's an ad. That's an ad promoting the virtue of short-term profit over long-term customer loyalty.
Yes, and that debate about OTAs is a really interesting one, and another one as well that might be worth pursuing just in its own right, the pros and cons.
But from the customer point of view, and this is the point I'm making, there's two very relevant points there. As from a customer point of view, the fact that it's an OTA, it doesn't matter. Whether it's the hotel or the OTA, it is the hotel's responsibility to manage that. So the perception of mistrust on how revenue is being managed starts there, because I don't differentiate as a customer between the OTA and the hotel. So that's, I think, the biggest thing. And the second point there is, as Michael rightly said, the pressure on him to give these rates to the OTAs makes him and the hotel complicit.
I think one of the interesting things that I've seen over recent years with the classes that I teach both to master's students and to undergrads when we get to pricing. One of the questions I ask of them is, generally all of these students have travelled quite a bit. Many of them have travelled to our campus. And I say to them, when you sit down on a flight, do you expect that the person next to you has paid the same price as you? And unanimously, no one does. Do you think the person in front of you has paid the same amount? So I think with airlines, I don't know whether that was the case 20, 30 years ago, that there was an expectation there was just one price across the board. I know from studying the history of revenue management and pricing, you have to go way back to the 70s before there was any concept of like a price for a flight in a certain class. I mean, for a long time, there's been that expectation there. When I ask them about hotels, do you expect the person stood next to you in the queue to have paid exactly the same price as you? Again, universally, unanimously, no. Perhaps that would be different if we were talking about an economy product like a Travelodge or a Premier Inn or a Ibis Budget or something like that. But in mid-scale and upscale hotels, no one expects everyone to have paid the same amount. The thing that annoys me about that OTA one is that the loyal customer, exactly as you said, Sarah, who should be of more value to us, is getting a worse deal. And I think that's more an indication of Trivago and the way they think the world should be than it is of hoteliers and how we think the world should be. And look, let's be clear about this. Lots of revenue managers don't do the right things by their guests. I've got a great example of sitting in a lobby of a hotel where I was doing some work. Guy comes out of the taxi, walks into reception. He's had a look on his phone and he sees the price today is less than when he bought the hotel room a fortnight ago. So he says, I'd like this price, please. And the receptionist said, I don't have the authority to change prices. So the guy says, okay, walks away from reception, comes back a couple of minutes later and says, well, I've just cancelled the booking that you were looking and I've made a new one on this rate. Can you check me in on this rate? And that's where the dear old receptionist thinks that the revenue manager has completely done them over and it's grossly unfair they've been put in that situation. So I think I'd be particularly interested in challenging that customer perception when we look at very, very high demands and maybe come back to a more normal situation. So when we're looking at a big event, and let's take something really obscure like a Rugby World Cup, there is huge demand. And if we take somewhere like Cardiff, it's a relatively small city, it's rugby mad, but for the rest of the world, for the majority of the rest of the world, they don't even know what rugby is. It's a bit of a peculiar event. So there are loads of people that will come to a city for normal reasons, whether it's business or whatever else it might be. They will have a look at the dates for a hotel in Cardiff because they're touring around the UK, and they'll think it's obscene to see an economy hotel charging multiples of what would be a normal expectation for that hotel. But from us, from a revenue management point of view, I'm going straight back to your point, Sarah, supply and demand. It's a small city, there are limited numbers of hotels. If you want to be in Cardiff when there's a Rugby World Cup game between France and the All Blacks, then I don't care whether you're interested in rugby or not. And this is me being the cold-hearted revenue guy. I can sell my hotel out. I could sell it out multiple times if that was possible, but it's not. And I know that people are paying a huge amount of money for the ticket to go to the Principality Stadium. So yeah, okay, normally my £50 room is now £300 and I'll be full and turning people away at £300. Now, is that unethical?
Well, it's funny because I don't see that as being so bad. And the reason I don't is because, again, it's overt. Now, I might not know about the rugby, but with one phone call, one explanation, someone could explain to me that it's the Rugby World Cup. And again, it's sort of almost binary. It's okay, there's something big going on. therefore, and it's a bit like the Robbie Williams versus or the Dua Lipa versus Jethro Tull. I get that there's something exciting that is valuable to people, and therefore the prices are up. The fact that I'm not into rugby, that's unfortunate, but it's like I say, it's kind of almost binary. I get it, and it's overt. The bit that leads the mistrust here is I don't understand. Tell me, explain to me why I'm paying this amount and they're paying that. Explain to me when is best for me to book. Is it best for me to book early? Is it best for me to book last minute? Is it best for me to, what are the benefits of me being a loyal customer? I want to know how it works. And at the moment, I think hotels do themselves a disservice by keeping it dark, keeping it a little bit mysterious, which is exactly what you need to be able to manipulate and manage revenue. But that is the element of it which ultimately could trip you up if customers get more and more into this. And it's not just hotels. Price comparison sites have caused this problem for other industries as well. But I think we do know that customers' voices are getting louder when it comes to ethical debates, and I think that's only going to increase. So by all means, sort of carry on, but beware of how it's looking and how it might be challenged. I'm
really pleased that you've taken our side on that one, because that particular case I gave you, there was a French journalist, it's going back a few years ago when that game was played in Cardiff, who wrote a scathing article about an economy hotel in Cardiff that was charging £300, and their normal rate, I think, was about 45 at the time. And it got spread across the French media quite heavily, and it was an alcohol hotel. So we got a very serious please explain on that. One of the things the journalist didn't mention was that a 4-star hotel in Cardiff had a minimum rate of 1,500, and our economy hotel was charging 300. So if I wanted to be brutal, I could have gone for 500 and still got it. But we chose to draw a line.
Yeah, I mean, when you do say the sort of 45 versus 300, that does feel quite extreme.
Yeah.
However, what's also interesting about that is that somebody picked up on it and made a deal out of it. And that's what I mean about, by all means, do this, price stuff at what you want, but don't do it. Be prepared for people to challenge it. And my problem with that one, I think if you challenge it, there's a very simple answer: Rugby World Cup.
Yep.
On a day-to-day basis, I don't see the same simple explanation being able to be given by the hotel as to why I'm paying this and someone else is paying that. And that's the bit, again, I mean, I am, from the customer's point of view, it's not fair. And if something doesn't feel fair, then I don't trust you. And that's all I'm asking from the brands and the hotels I'm looking at is trust. And, I think, and it would be really interesting to sort of, hear if people have got sort of comments and things on in the chat is what's the solution here? What can hotels do to reach out to people like me and make me trust you more? And I am going to throw in here, pricing is one thing, and I think there are some times when it's just about justifiable, but there are other elements of this that I think are less so. And I'm going to, of course, now go into overbooking, because this is something that, and I know you're going to say airlines, but aside from airlines, I can't see from a customer point of view any justification whatsoever in this day and age in regard to overbooking a hotel. And the reason I say this, and I know you'll have very good reasons of yours, but the reason I say it from a customer point of view is that in this day and age, I cannot see it is feasible that I'm going to book a hotel without you having my credit card details, and that you will not have told me that at least a no-show will be 100% cancellation fee. Therefore, there shouldn't be a situation where if I don't show up, you don't charge me. Therefore, there is no justification for overbooking, even if you expect some people not to show up, because the room has been paid for. You are not out of pocket, the room has been paid for. Therefore, the only motivation for overbooking has got to be greed, because it definitely doesn't have the customer in mind.
I think, first of all, I need to flag up, COVID has changed your position, I think, far more than you realise, because the idea of guarantees and cancellation fees has just been blown away for everybody everywhere. The expectation of the market now is that prepayments and guarantees and charging people, the expectation is customers have full flexibility at the moment for reasons associated with COVID. And the airlines have been getting some pretty bad press about being anything other than very prompt in full refunds. You've got people like Ryanair and EasyJet who are trying to get you to, they keep the money, but you can book for another flight at some other time. So
don't get me started on that one.
Well, yes. I think coming out of COVID, the attitude to overbooking when there is much, much, much smaller numbers of guests who are guaranteed in any way. I think the second thing is maybe the public perception is you've got my credit card so you can charge me. When we charge no-shows onto credit cards and people dispute it with their bank, the bank will take the account holder's side, not the hotel side. So when we charge guarantees, we lose a lot of that revenue and we have costs associated with losing that revenue. So it is a very real choice between holding rooms when you know not everyone's going to turn up and you cannot get money from the people who don't turn up, or you can only get a tiny amount of it. And to give you the revenue manager's perspective on this, because I've done project work in Yokohama, for example, and a few other places in Japan, but the particular hotel in Yokohama stuck in my mind because they're a very polite culture, and culturally, overbooking is just not something they can do or tolerate. So it was made very clear to me, no matter how strong my case for how we can improve revenue through responsible overbooking. And in my mind, there's a difference between irresponsible United Airlines sending in the security to drag someone kicking and screaming off the plane while the entire aircraft is filled with people with their phones videoing the debacle. That's irresponsible overbooking and makes all of us look bad. At the other end of the scale is hotels who almost never actually fill unless there's been a genuine screw up in the reservation system and they've accidentally done it. So in my mind, we've got a high demand Saturday night in a city like London or Edinburgh or wherever you like. You know there is enough demand to fill. If you do not overbook, you absolutely know there is no chance that there will be someone sleeping in every room you have. Because there will be last minute no-shows, there will be people who check out early, there will be people who modify their bookings for other dates. There are all sorts of reasons why there is a dip in the last 24 hours. So if you know, the question to me is about risk. If you take a massive risk and mean there's a high probability of relocating guests, that's irresponsible. You would say unethical. If you do nothing, for my role as a revenue manager, I've got two concerns. I know you won't agree with one of them. The first is obvious. Every extra room I sell, if I'm a little bit bolder, is worth hundreds of pounds to us, not just from room revenue, F&B and everything else. But there is a part of me, as an old front desk guy, every time I say no to someone on the phone or say no to them on the email, that's not particularly hospitable if I know for certain I will have empty rooms. Surely the hospitable thing to do is to accommodate people rather than turn them away and know you'll have empty rooms.
I think that's a nice spin on it and sounds good. And also it sounds almost biblical in the sort of room at the inn.
My father-in-law would be proud of me.
However, I think I understand the pressure. If your job is to maximize the revenue of every single room, of course you are obliged to try and do that. And there is a scenario here whereby you can take a risk and most of the time it pays off. The unethical part is the time it doesn't pay off, because it isn't justifiable to the person that you've just walked. And it does happen. And all of that practice, you can wrap it all and make it sound good, but to the one person that's been walked, it's wrong because they've paid money. And again, I'm going to go back to my concert scenario. If I buy a ticket for, I'm back to Robbie Williams now because it's easier. I buy a ticket for Robbie Williams. I might decide that all I want to do is just go in for the encore because I don't like the rest of it. Now, just because I happen to have come in late or I haven't seen the first few songs, the O2 doesn't necessarily go, right, she's not coming in. Let's get someone else in there. Let's quickly sell it again. They know it's my right to come in. I can come in for the last note if I want to, because I've paid my money for that. And so you don't get that happening in other scenarios, apart from obviously your flights, which you've mentioned. And that's just so for me, this is a simple ethical argument that I get your point about COVID and about hotels being more flexible, but the truth is I still think we'll go back to a situation where you will have my credit card. Maybe there's an educational point here to be made around cancellation charges. And maybe a lot of this is about communications and education with the customer so that they understand. Because all I'm asking you to do is help me understand. And so I think if we get back to a stage where you've got my credit card, I know I'm going to get charged, that's the way it works, then I would really hope that would then take the pressure off you to have to try and manipulate this. Because if you look at it on paper, it's wrong.
And I think the balancing point here, if I was revenue managing your hotel, I'd absolutely still be trying to get you to go at least 1 or 2 rooms over and be able to show you that we're not overbooking huge numbers of people and booking out huge numbers of people. Some of the wildest reactions I've had were when I had a hotel that was 200 rooms overbooked, and it was a 180 room hotel. But it happened to be in a market where we knew, and this is just for some of you who get freaked out by these things, we knew that there were multiple travel agents trying to secure the same piece of group business. And we learned that what we could do is say yes to 5 group requests, knowing that in reality only 1 would travel. And we ended up doing some sneaky little stuff in the background. We would only enter 1. We'd say yes to all 5, knowing that only 1 Chinese group is traveling. So for those of you who are looking at your overbooking, thinking the revenue managers are screaming idiots, there may be some other stuff going on as well, especially on long lead times when you know what the wash is on your groups and the materialization is on them. But I do want to just explore one other element on this. If we take that case that I was talking about, a hotel in London or Edinburgh, high demand on a Saturday night, we know there is more demand than we can accommodate, and we will be turning people away. We know there is a lot more demand for one night on the Saturday than there is for the 2 nights, Friday and Saturday. So at some point, one of the things I may do as a revenue manager is close Saturday to arrivals. So you ring up and you want to book Saturday for one night. Sorry, there's no rooms available on Saturday. And I get the receptionist coming in to me and saying, but there are rooms. I can see there are rooms. Yeah, absolutely. The last 20 rooms are going to go to people who want to stay 2 nights, Friday, Saturday. Now, you as a customer can't really see that. Frequent travelers, like corporate travelers, they've learnt about minimum length of stay. So if I set a minimum length of stay of 2 nights on the Saturday, they'll book Saturday, Sunday, and then check out a day early. So we have to use things like CTAs, close to arrivals. If you see that people can book Friday for 2 nights, but you can't book Saturday for 1 night, do you see that as a problem ethically?
I think I just go back to my original thing with when you're looking at all of these, and by the way, can I say, because I'm sure there's people on this call that are doing this job, and you know, it's clever what you're doing. You know, you are in a position where you are genuinely having to manage and juggle a lot of plates in the air in order to maximize your revenue. So, you know, hats off to you for the skill that goes into it. But I'm going to go back to the topic of this, which is this really ethical? And I'm going to go back to my original thing, was, are these practices designed with the customer in mind? And I can't see any way that they are. They're designed for profit. And I know that it's not your intention to in any way undermine customer loyalty, but every single one of these decisions has the ability to be driven by short-term profit over long-term loyalty. And I question that as a wise business strategy in general, and how maybe, and again, looking at solutions rather than just saying, you know, hurling stuff, is maybe that's worth a wider discussion within the hospitality arena about how we can balance these two areas: the need for maximizing the revenue potential of the hotel, but ensuring that we put the customer at the heart of our decision making. And you know, that's whenever I'm talking about anything in terms of, you know, ethical, and also the big debate now with sort of sustainability. I think there are bigger questions that we're being asked to consider over and above simply driving profit.
So are you saying that when I'm working with the customer in mind, I should give preference to the 20 customers who are wanting to book earlier over the 20 customers who are booking closer to arrival? Because really the choice for me, I will be turning away 20 people. There are going to be 20 disappointed customers no matter what. What I'm trying to do from a revenue management point of view is to protect the availability for the customers who deliver value to the business. And maybe the greatest value will be I'll protect some of those for the loyalty customer so that Mrs. Travago can't get in, and the only person standing at the front desk is the loyalty customer, because that's a value decision. The loyalty customer is worth more to us than the one-off Travago, totally cash-driven, don't give a damn about us. So if my focus is on value, then I'll protect the last 20 rooms for the people who want to stay 2 nights, or for the loyalty customers who want to stay 1 night. And what I'm trying to do is thinking from a customer point of view, but also a value to the business. When there will be 20 people turned away, why should it be the 20 that booked in the last, or tried to book in the last 3 days? Because remember, just as you said, in the last 3 days, now my competitors are closing out. The supply is dropping, the demand is high. You're happy for me to drive the rate up, but I'm going to keep the rate low because I want to take the 2-nighters. So
Again, I mean, I think there's some wisdom in there, and there's some compelling commercial reasons as to why you are wanting to do what you're wanting to do. I think we still go back to the same thing of making sure we're talking about ethics here.
Yeah.
And ethics is what's morally right or wrong. That's at the heart of when we talk about an ethical debate. So I suppose I put the question back onto you and any other sort of revenue managements here is when you are looking at these various different decisions you have to make and this juggling that you're required to do because it's your job, morally, how do you feel about each of those decisions? And if you can stand by and feel okay morally with the decisions that you're taking, then that's fine, good on you. But if you're feeling uncomfortable because, as you rightly said at the beginning of this debate, Michael, the pressure is on you to get as much money for that right room, that high price every night, and it's relentless. If you're making your decisions because of the pressure that's put on you to make the most money every night, then I would question that. If you're making your decisions because you've really thought about it and morally you feel okay with those decisions, then by all means carry on, but be prepared to be challenged. And one more point is, all of those things are great, but again, just educate me as a customer. Tell me when it's better to book. Help me understand the best way to work with you, when to book, how to book. All of these things, I think we could do a better job of helping to educate.
I've got a comment here from one of our listeners who, on that point actually about communication, is saying the question is, this is lovely, Ina, how much do we reveal to our guests? And she makes the comment that a lot of pricing strategies are based on market segmentation and different willingness to pay. But how will this be perceived by the guest? And should it remain an industry secret? I think that is a tricky one, because it is quite a complex art, isn't it, revenue management or science, depending on your perspective, and how much we want to communicate, we want to be transparent, but will they understand the ins and outs? So that was one point. Another point that I thought was an interesting one that hasn't been made today is that most hotels incur considerable cost by walking a guest due to overbooking, and so there's no big incentive to overbook. That's from Philip. And I think that's a good point. And I'd also, if we have the chance, I'd love to get onto the topic of putting the responsibilities. So the revenue manager sits there in his lovely office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or maybe a little longer, but then goes home and leaves the student receptionist who's there on her own last thing at night. She's the last one on, and she has to deal with the guest. So that, from an overbooking perspective, I think those are both very, very good points.
Can I just pick up on? I was just going to pick up, sorry, if I may, on the transparency point and your point about sort of art and science. Like I say, there's no denying here that there is some very clever work going on behind the scenes in order to juggle these things. But personalized pricing, which is essentially what it is, this is the area that customers get nervous about, because it is about big data. It is about what you know about me. Customer segmentation is you knowing more and more about me and my habits, and that is the area that scares us as customers. And the whole artificial intelligence and algorithms making these decisions. Who is making the decision around what price I get at your hotel? And so you might want to keep it a bit of a dark area because it's better for you, but it's certainly not better for the customer. And I'm just going to probably sort of repeat myself by saying I think we're entering an era. We're seeing it across industries where transparency is becoming more and more important. And I think this is just an area that will eventually will catch up, and customers will be demanding more transparency. So you might as well kind of get into that headspace now and get ready to articulate it and come clean with people, I think, a bit more.
I think that's a really important point, talking about transparency, because going way, way, way back to when I was in my late teens working on the front desk of a hotel, and we used to print registration cards and stuff like that, there would be certain rates in your PMS that were NPR, no print rate. So you can print a registration card for someone who's booked through JTB, a Japanese wholesaler. They fill it in, but the little rate box is blank. You've got it on your screen and you can see it there, but the customer doesn't see it. And one of the things you get trained in on front desk very early on, if it says NPR and the customer comes up, and there are customers who ask what their rate is, you must not tell them, because the rate that you've got is the rate with JTB. Now, in their high street travel agency in Japan, they paid a price for a luxury hotel that is very different to the rate you've got in your system. So as a front desk person, you have this really awkward, oh no, I can't tell you what the rate is because you paid in Japan to your travel agent and I can't see what you paid. And they just sit there and say, okay, what is my rate? And they keep pushing because they want to know. Why are they pushing? For exactly the reason you're saying. They don't trust it. They don't believe it's transparent. I don't know whether it's me they don't trust. It certainly feels like it when they're persistently asking the question. Maybe it's their travel agent they don't trust. I don't know, but there are certain things that are confidential and I think will remain so for a long time. There are certain points of transparency that with the business models we've got can't and won't change. I think where that's changed, and Jane brought it up quite interestingly, in my view, a lot of the public know that OTAs charge high commissions. And I think a lot of the traveling public who understand that are increasingly using OTAs as a rate shopper, as a brochure, and then they'll go direct to the place where they want to book and ask for a better rate. And we'll happily do our best to give them that better rate because we don't have that cost of sale associated with it. Maybe that's me working in favour of the customer as a brutal revenue driver.
Well, I mean, I think there's a brilliant point here that you make about, again, hotels collectively taking back more control over this against the price comparison and the online travel agents. And I think there's a lot of things they can be doing to communicate directly with the customer about the benefits of booking direct. And I'm sure it's a conversation in every hotel and sort of on a daily basis is how do we do this? And it all comes back again to, I think, communication and making it easy. I think that the great thing about some of the big price comparison OTAs is that they make life very, very easy for the customer. And, you know, they make life very flexible for the customer. And that is missing sometimes. That experience is missing when you go directly to the hotel's website. And I think there's a real learning point there in learning from what makes life easy as a customer with OTAs and really thinking about the journey when it comes to and the communication when it comes to direct bookings, because I think a lot of the industry is missing tricks there. And you know, with this moment in time with COVID and people not having been able to travel and book hotels, the OTAs, they're struggling at the moment. I mean, they're in a pretty dreadful state. As with a lot of business, this might be that reset moment where we rethink about how we do things in the future. And that maybe is a classic example of collectively the industry coming together and saying, how do we reset this?
Well, I think the interesting thing on that is if we go back to when revenue management as a discipline took off, it was back 99, 2000, around that time when the OTAs came on the scene. Because, Sarah, exactly the point you're making was the game changer. When online price comparison became the norm, the transparency now existed for hotels in a way that it never had before. And that was why people needed revenue managers. It was now so complicated to keep up with, you know, this price here. You could change prices a lot more easily. Everyone could see everyone else's prices. You no longer had to ring 3 different hotels to get 3 different prices, or go into a travel agent for them to type away on their GDS. Now you could just see it all on your computer. So the reason revenue management is as strong as it is now is because that complexity and transparency has come in, and you need people who can help you navigate your way through that. I just wanted to briefly come back to that question, Jane, from someone who I think's probably been working on a front desk, talking about the revenue manager scarpering before any of the book outs have to be done. The best teams I've worked with at handling overbooking are the ones who work very hard at understanding their risk. And Ian Sinclair, who was my duty manager in a hotel where I think we did this very well, he filled the hotel more often than anyone else, and he did fewer guest relocations than anyone else. And if he knew he was going to be full, he'd come in early. If his shift started at 3, he'd be in at 1:30, 2 o'clock at the latest. And he'd walk into reservations and say, I've looked through, I can see we're only 3 over. I've got no chance of filling. We're going to be turning people away. Take me to -6. He'd get to -6, but he'd keep an eye on it all the way through his shift. He very rarely had to relocate because he really knew the guest. He put the time into getting people to ring if he had contact numbers. So to me, it's about the risk. You can be irresponsible with risk and maybe make some more money and have massive negative impacts when you get it wrong, or you can be very responsible with risk and make more money. And I think that's the ethical side. How was he able to do that? We spent a lot of time in training and working through identifying that risk, and he had experience at it. And I don't mind saying he was incentivized by it as well. He quite liked having nice bottles of wine for each time he filled. So was that a revenue driver for the hotel? I'll leave other people to talk about the ethics of motivating with alcohol. Maybe that's a whole separate conversation.
Whole different session. Jane, I think you had something.
We have a lot of comments coming in, so I'm just gonna pick some of them. And one of them rightly points out from Philip here that revenue management also means lowering prices when demand are low. So it's not all. The pressure is different, isn't it? I mean, today's topic is going down that overbooking rate, but it's a different pressure as well. Just making sure that you sell as many as you can on low demand days as well. And there's another one here from Nikolai saying, if you do it right, the occasional book out costs are more than covered by the additional revenue generated from the overbookings. But that's the point, isn't it, really? So a comment here really about the 2 different industries. One from Roland about if you get messages from your Tesco Club card, then that's perfectly acceptable, and that's maybe an educational thing, but it's just, I guess it's the introducing that into hospitality and making it much more acceptable in our industry as opposed to other industries as well. And then picking up on your Robbie Williams point, actually, Sarah, I think that resonated more with the audience of Dua, actually. This is Janelle, who's one of our tutors on our revenue management course, actually. Thanks, Janelle, for that. Do a great job. The Robbie Williams concert ticket is fully paid, and the audience member does not expect a refund if they come late. Sadly, as Michael said, guests often dispute no-shows and the hotel loses money. No-shows are a big industry issue, and she reminds us of last summer when Tom Kerridge was really bringing to the fore what was very important restaurant overbookings and the impact, the serious, often end of business generating impact of no-shows arriving in restaurants. So her question is, how do we charge deposit and cancellation policies to protect us, but also keep the guest happy?
Well, I think as a consumer, as a customer, that's absolutely fine with me. I realise historically, clearly there's issues here, but if Robbie Williams can do it, and that industry can do it, and the customer accepts that I've paid my money, you've got my credit card, and I'm not going to get a refund if I don't show up. If they can do it, hotels can do it. I mean, I realise it's not as simple as that, but the truth is, with a bit of time and a bit of education, and to identify that as that's the problem, so let's work on a solution to that problem, rather than saying, there's a problem there, I tell you what, let's overbook. Let's deal with that problem by doing something that could cause another problem. It doesn't feel like the right solution to the right problem to me, but I do realise historically that there are issues there, and it's not, you know, they say that things are easier said than done. Well, that's normally because that's why we see people talking about things a lot more than actually doing them. But yeah, I think we should learn from other industries and sort out some practices that way.
I think the example you bring up, Jane, about the restaurants is an interesting one, where high demand times, restaurants in places, well, high demand restaurant locations, they are requiring credit card guarantees for tables of 6 or more. And there is still a bit of a pushback from the general public because it's never been done before. And I think there are restaurants that are taking the lead with this and who need to, but there are always going to be restaurants that don't have particularly high demand. And yeah, they're happy to take a booking for a table of 6. And if you don't turn up, it doesn't matter because they're not losing anything. It's the high demand restaurants that have to take that, because as soon as they're pushing a few tables together and then they sit there for an hour and a half making no money for you, that's a real pain when you've only got 100 seats in your restaurant, and there's, you know, a chunk of them that are out of action for effectively the peak demand time. So
I think that the bottom line there is, for me, it's as a customer, I'm happy to pay a deposit. I'm going to get used to it. I might feel a bit odd right now, but I'm going to get used to it, and it's going to become something that I expect to do.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'll get used to it. I'd prefer to do that than arrive at my restaurant and find that somebody has come in and said, no, I'll pay you a bit more for that table, and so I've been bumped out. And that would be exactly the same. So, yeah, you know, I prefer to work on, let's change the culture of it, let's change behaviour, let's get people understanding, if I pay my money, if you don't show up, you unfortunately, it's 100% cancellation fee.
So the communication piece is the real key in no matter how you do it.
Absolutely, and I think we're sort of running out of time. So yes, as with everything, it's from the consumer point of view, communicate with me, help me understand.
And as it seems to come up every time we do a webinar, whatever the topic, communication always seems to be key. So yes, you're right, we are running out of time. So thank you all for listening in, for your questions and comments. I know I didn't get round to all of them, but thank you for sending those in as well. Somebody made a comment, actually, Sarah, you said you wouldn't want to be a revenue manager. Somebody else has said, no, and nor would I want to be Prime Minister at the moment. And I think that's very relevant, isn't it, in our current situation. But it's it was really interesting listening to all of that and reading all the comments and questions. So thank you very much for those of you who sent those in and for listening today.
I think just one concluding comment, if I could. It's been quite clear, I think, to me in this conversation with Sarah, yes, we can revenue manage ethically, even though Sarah was a little bit kind to me or cautious or something in saying each person needs to decide for themselves. I think it's clear to all of us that there are ways you can revenue manage ethically. In principle, you can. It's just how you do it and how clear and open you are with your customers, that transparency word again. So I'm very happy, and I'm going to head back to work. Thank you.
So those of you listening, please remember that all the opinions expressed today are exactly that, opinions, and should be treated as such. And if you need any formal advice, then please approach your professional advisor or come to me, and I can introduce you to Michael or Sarah if you want to speak to them any more. But thank you so much, Michael and Sarah, for joining me today. Michael, I've just got to pick you up on one point, saying that the Rugby World Cup was obscure. Not in my world, not in my house. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will be uploading a recording of today's debate alongside our most recent webinars and masterclasses, along with a summary of the key points. Our next session will be a finance update from BDO, always a really popular update and event. It's on the 10th of June, it'll start at 8:30, so please do register or perhaps spread the words to your finance colleagues because they will enjoy that one, I'm sure. Thank you for listening. We look forward to seeing you all soon, and goodbye from me.
And goodbye from us.
Yep.
Thanks.
Bye now. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.